everyone. My name is Dia Hakim, but you can just call me Dia. I go by they, them pronouns, and I'm currently wearing a red t-shirt with a black jacket, and I'm sitting in front of a white screen with some green house decorations like on it. And I am presently working as a multidisciplinary artist, and my practice is derived from performance and the written word as material. And I'm usually inspired by the lived experiences of queerness, gender, and race within a 21st century body. And for this think tank, I would also love to direct your attention to some wonderful artists that will be speaking today, which is Star, Mia, Lucia, Anais, Remo, and Aiden. Please allow them to introduce themselves to you as well before we get on with the program. On to you guys.
Hello, my name is Star Malvena. I use all pronouns. I am non-binary, gender fluid, autistic artist from Edinburgh, Scotland. I specialise in performing and writing, and I'm currently studying at Edinburgh College, doing an HND in acting and performance. I love creating, and I think my specialty and my interest lies more deeply in writing stories that help people, writing stories for theatre, writing poetry. A big main thing is that I want to write stories that help make voices heard. And that's me. And I'll pass it to Mia.
I think Mia's having a bit of difficulty connecting to the audio. So can we go on to the next youth artist?
Yes, I will now pass it to Mia.
Sorry, Mia. Yeah, Lucia.
I'm Lucia. I'm a performer in Scotland now. I'm also studying acting at the Edinburgh College, and I'm particularly interested in comedy and physical theatre, as well as political theatre, because I think it's really important to use, a platform that you have to maybe elevate voices which are often overheard. So yeah, on to the next person.
Hello. Oh, sorry. Hello. My name's Aiden. I also study acting at Edinburgh College. And I think I particularly love working with people who just think the same way I do, in the sense of want to create something powerful and a strong bit of theatre that we could all be proud of. And I think our group is definitely very, very good for that. So that's me.
Hello, I'm Remo. I also study acting at Edinburgh College. For me, I'm also a performer. For me, I have a specific interest in political theatre, and as everyone else has said, just theatre that sort of amplifies the voices of other people, voices that, like Lucia said, might not be heard otherwise. And I think theatre is a really good platform for doing that. So yeah, I'll pass it on to the next person as well.
Hello, I'm Anais. I'm from Singapore, and I work for an ethnic minority theatre company in Singapore, and I'm really passionate about the work that we do.
That's everyone, I think. If Mia's not able to speak, I'm so sorry, Mia. Okay, so before we pull up the slides, let me just introduce ITAC real quickly. And if Clara can open the slides in a bit, that would be great. All right. So ITAC, or the International Teaching Artists Collaborative, is a worldwide network for artists who work in participatory settings to create a positive social impact. These practitioners go by many titles in many different countries and languages, often called teaching artists, participatory artists, community artists, or socially engaged artists, or other titles as such. So thank you so much to ITAC for supporting our project and for giving us this platform to be seen as like youth and growing artists. And the aim of this think tank as well is to lead our innovator project, raising the visibility of teaching artistry. And that relates to our ongoing project of Call to Action, which is a quiet protest through the medium of the living newspaper, which is coached by us from Singapore and Scotland, and is supported by Kai and Clara from ITAC Collaborative and Collision Theatre, respectively. And this whole project is actually a response to Eric's plea at the ITAC conference in Norway, which is really fun. And Eric, if you have any words you would like to say to us before we begin, please go ahead.
Oh, that's a dangerous invitation. I'll say
Oh,
just
no.
a few words. I am the co-founder of ITAC, and at ITAC 6 in Oslo last September, I was able to give a call to the field to say, here are these artists who work in schools and communities by the tens of thousands around the world doing some of the most important social change work and yet invisible to their larger arts communities, to their social communities, and the time had come to make this field more visible. So the call at the conference was to find creative ways to raise the visibility of this sleeping giant of social change. And the session we have today is a response to that, and especially encouraging for all of us. It is a voice from the young people who are going to carry this field forward into realizing its potential. So thank you, young people, today for helping to wake the sleeping giant.
Waking the sleeping giant is it's a very heavy and enormous responsibility, but we thank you so much for trusting us with that as well. All right. So, like I mentioned previously, today's presentation is called Raising the Visibility of Teaching Artistry, and we will be covering about 5 points throughout this presentation. The first being, what does politics mean to us as young artists? A concept called big P's and small P's, or big politics and small politics. The third being breaking the hierarchy and how we go about doing that. And we'll also be talking a little bit about call to action that has been ongoing since about 2021, and also raising the visibility of teaching artistry as well. So I'll be passing the mic to Star, who will be beginning our presentation by answering the question of what does politics mean to them exactly. So on to you, Star.
Hello. So yeah, I'm Star again. And first of all, I want everyone to write down, even just write it down in your brain, just think about the first word that comes to your mind when you think politics, and just hold on to it. Just the first word that comes up. You can write it in the chat, just anywhere that you feel comfortable with. And I'll give you guys a minute to do that. Ooh, participation stuck. Ooh. Overwhelming. Yeah. Yeah. And now if you got your word, corruption, yeah, sorry. I want you to think about why that word came to mind and why you think it's important to you and what that word means in context without politics, just that word as a whole, and if it has any connection to you, meaning to you, which could stem or lead into connection of politics to you, which I think is a main thing that we're going to be talking about. Can't move forward, yeah. And I think especially with yeah, participation is strong to me. Oh my gosh, I love all of these. Thank you so much for for engaging and participating. So many truths, so much pain that you don't know what you're supposed to do with all the information. That's really beautiful, yeah. So while we have those in our mind, I want to also share mine. Mine is change. Change is the first word that comes to my mind. Change is scary. It can be terrifying. Doing things differently is not an easy thing to wrap your head around. And I think a lot of the responses I've had are that it's difficult, that it's scary. And it's about power, maybe imbalance of power, like we've just had. And I think change can also be very beautiful. I think it's necessary and inevitable. which sort of brings me on to what politics means to me. And hopefully this can be sort of what you guys are doing in your head while I'm talking about this, sort of taking your word and putting it into what politics means to you. So to me, it's about acceptance of change and difference, whether that is good change or bad. It's to accept that you are unhappy with a system, a company, or even the way that someone's treating someone else. And then to do something about it, whether it's big or small, it's still a change, and just using your voice can do so much more than we can see. And I think even just thinking of our words and thinking of politics in our heads, it shows no matter how big or small we all make political moves, and we all form political opinions, even if we don't notice that we do. So again, thank you so much for your input and engaging. Oh, my phone thing. Anyway, but I think that it means to use your voice and to understand one another. To me, anyway, it means to fight for not only yours but other people's voices who you believe in and share support with, and for the people whose voices cannot yet be heard. Yeah, I think as an autistic person growing up in a neurotypical built world, it was very damaging. And so to me, that's something I want to change, is the way that the world views disability, or sometimes just doesn't view them at all. And if you look at the presentation, I don't know if it'll come up, but I've just got a few questions just to think about in context to your word as well, in context to being a teaching artist, to teaching artistry, and to listening to young people's voices, but also your voice. And taking that into context, I think my main thing is, as long as you're not hurting yourself or other people, I will support you for whoever you want to be. And that's like the little sentence I've come up with. And if you want to come up with a little sentence of your word, that would be amazing. Just, again, still thinking about it. And yeah, the questions are sort of, how do I help activate their voice? How do you, as a teaching artist, as a teaching sort of guidance, how do you help to activate other people's voices? And how do you activate your voice as teaching artistry in a political sense, using big P and small p, which is what Dia will talk about in segment 2. How do we spread awareness, even just start by spread awareness of teaching artistry? And protest is such a scary word. How do we start one against things such as not funding arts, and against the hierarchy of levels in guidance and teaching, which will also be talked about. But yeah, for the big P and small p in relation to teaching artistry, I'm going to bring that over to Dia. And yeah, thank you so much for engaging. And I hope that even just thinking about your word has given you something to latch onto and to hold on to for this presentation.
Thank you, Star. That was really beautifully put. And I think you kind of put forth this sense of what it means to kind of take up space as an autistic person. And I think it's worth kind of like noting that all these different kinds of communities are slowly starting to fight their way for a place at the table and to be seen as valid artists, and that their art is also just as important as mainstream art as well, whatever you find mainstream art as. So that was really beautiful. Thank you so much, Star. All right, so I'll be talking a little bit about what the heck is big P and small p. And if I could get Clara to pull up the slides, if that's okay. All right, so before I start talking, I would like everyone to kind of look at the slides and see these two pictures. And when you think about big politics and small politics, which one of these pictures resonate with you in terms of those phrases? And you can speak, or you can put them in the chat. So what do these pictures kind of like make you feel? And do you think whether these are big or small acts of protest, small acts of politics? I'll give maybe about 10 to 30 seconds for everyone to kind of take in the picture and respond. If you feel like you want to do that, if you don't, that's completely okay as well. Rachel says both huge. Oh, yeah, I think the general consensus seems to be that both is very important, which is completely valid. All right. Thank you so much for everyone who's responded. I have a few more pictures I would like everyone to engage with, if that's fine. Clara, if you could move on to the next slide, if that's okay. If no one has any response to these pictures as well, that's completely okay. Also, I'm aware that the image descriptions are a bit long, but I just wanted it to be as accessible as possible. Big P and little p. Ooh, thank you. If you would like to explain why you feel that they are big or small, that's also very much okay. I would love to hear what people think as well. Okay. Big P energy. I like that. I like that. It's a very, very nice way to kind of put it. We can move on to the last one, if that's okay. Thank you. This will be the last one, and then we'll proceed with the presentation. Big P on the left. Ooh, that's interesting. Okay. Ooh, oh, big. Oh, okay. On the right. Okay, that's very interesting. When I showed this draft to some of my other friends, also everybody said it was the left that was a bigger P, which I think is interesting. Okay. Both are big and both requires courage. Yes. Oh, courage is a very important word. I really like that. Okay, thank you so much to everyone who's been engaging with me. Clara, if you could move to the next slide, if that's okay. All right. So I have been throwing around big P and small p like buzzwords, but I promise they will make some sense in a minute. So I'll just bring it back to call to action and what we've been doing with those phrases since the start of our project. We kind of learned through the project that there are different kinds of different displays of politics and what those might mean to some people. So big P's may be defined, for instance, as protest, voting or huge moments of urgency that kind of happen in real time. Whereas small P's can be personally defined to like organizing, mutual aid, and even down to feelings of compassion and care, and kind of standing up for people in dire times of like need. And this kind of learning kind of inevitably led all of us in the project to kind of think and feel about the different issues that we cared about. So for example, my project in Call to Action was about gay characters in the media, particularly like Velma. in Scooby-Doo who was confirmed recently to be a lesbian. And this kind of seemingly went from a small P until we realized that real life hate crimes happen outside of this news, and parents would kind of shield their children from kind of entertaining queer media in G-rated television, which of course isn't really so small anymore, which was interesting. And I'd like to ask everyone like another question, and you're free to respond in the chat, or if you want to talk, I'll happily give you that space to talk. Is there anything that you identify with in terms of what is political, like in the media, and how do those forms of media kind of like inform your teaching artistry? And maybe I'll let this question ruminate or marinate for a bit. Marinate sounds like I'm cooking something, but
yeah, cooking up a protest. Come on.
okay, yes, that's true. When I think of marinate, I think of like flipping over a fish for some reason. But yeah, if anybody would like to respond or speak, you're free to do so. But if not, I can just proceed. Greta Thunberg. Oh. Okay, so Eric says, I am old, but I am inspired by artists who step forward on climate issues. That's a really loaded sentence. Eric, would you want to share why that makes you feel that way?
Yeah. They are finding creative ways to pull public attention to this issue that is so easy to push to the side, and using their creative power to pull awareness and directly address this most crucial issue is inspirational to me and feeds my energy to follow their lead.
I agree. And I think we're getting very creative with how we protest in many different ways as well. Like, I think a very common kind of a common new way of getting people to protest is through very small theming acts, which I think is really, really important and really interesting. So going back to kind of like this whole idea of like big P and small P, for me personally, like I'm a budding educator, like I'm still in the process of getting my teaching certificate. And personally, when I set out as a teacher, I was thinking a lot about how aspects of my identity and how I experience the world impacts the way that I come into contact with many different people, especially when it comes to like passing knowledge onto other people. Because I know a lot of us kind of set out as artists to kind of catalyze a form of change, whether that's through your experiences as like a person in general, an artist, a student. And it kind of amplifies when you dabble into like teaching artistry, because like making is just so intensely political. Like when we make things, we bring people together and we bring so many personal experiences together. And we kind of hope that this space of creation allows this space for us and our collaborators to kind of find a way for us to be ourselves and to kind of teach other people that there is a better way of looking at things and that a better world is completely possible. And for me personally, I think these ideas of like big politics and small politics have 100% kind of influenced the way that I view the world personally, because I grew up kind of queer, and I didn't grow up kind of queer, but I grew up queer in a conservative household and an ethnic minority in a majority Chinese country. And when you grow up in these kinds of things, or even if you didn't, you kind of slowly come into this sobering realization about how these realities affect other people very quickly. And there's this kind of importance to acknowledge that there's this real audacity to kind of dream of worlds that can be better, and this eminent need to kind of want to do that. And I personally feel like this artistry of like teaching of art allows these kind of dreams to like slowly take fruition. And I personally feel like teaching artistry is a kind of form that blurs this line between what big politics might mean and what small politics might mean. And everyone's personal politics is gonna influence the way that they view the world. My personal politics of being like queer, brown, and autistic will inevitably kind of bleed into intimate settings like learning, like creating. And we have this added privilege as artists to kind of take these complex ideas and make them into art. And this act of creation is so natural and it's so innately human, and it's kind of filled with this huge potential to really and genuinely make this huge difference. Yeah, so thank you so much for listening and engaging with me. I really appreciate kind of knowing everyone's thoughts on what big and small politics might mean to them. And yeah, so next up, I think we have Mia and Anais, who will be talking about quiet acts of politics.
Hi, so sorry, Lucia. Yeah, sorry. Mia is not gonna, as unable to join, so I think Lucia is gonna help take over what she had to say.
Yeah. So essentially what we did is, if you could move on to the next slide very quickly. Perfect, thank you. We broke up quiet acts of protest in sort of 3 circles because we thought, for us at least, it was easier to understand. So the bit that Mia was going to cover was self. So it's small acts of protest which may not necessarily make an impact on anyone else, but it's for you, you know. So her example was, for instance, making sure to buy vegetables that have less plastic wrapping, you know, because that's something you decide to do for yourself. You don't want to contribute to, you know, making the planet even worse. Or even going into acting, because that's such a thing that if you're from, you know, a background where it's usually you get expected, you go to university, you go and do whatever, more like, the word I'm looking for is like a more stereotypically like
Academic?
That's the word, yeah, academic path, you know. So going to do acting could be a small act of protest as well. Then for community, it's like aspects that could also, you know, affect other people in your community for the protests that you do. So for instance, an example of that for me is how I express myself. For instance, clothing-wise, I dress in quite an androgynous way. And for me, I grew up with quite strict gender roles. So it was expected that a woman would, you know, wear dresses and have long hair. So for me, cutting my hair, whilst it may not have been a massive thing for other people, for me, where I was and the people I was surrounded with, that was a massive thing. And that was such a protest for me. And I feel like that also helped other people because they saw, you know, this is something that you can do, this is all right. And, you know, you're you're expressing yourself and you're happy with who you are. And I feel like that can, you know, it's like a knock-on effect. It can affect other people. So yeah, I think Anais was going to talk about wider protests.
Yeah, so I think the final bit of this protesting that we want to talk about is what it means to protest in your country. And similar to what Lucia mentioned, it looks different to everyone in every country. I want to share a bit about the unique way that we protest in Singapore. So protests are only allowed at a small park in the central business district, and only once organizers have received a license. It's illegal to freely gather and protest without a license. In fact, any gathering of more than 5 individuals with a political agenda is considered illegal. Despite that law, a very interesting case that Dia mentioned also before is of Jolovan Wam, who was a local civil rights activist who was arrested and charged with illegal assembly after standing alone in public, holding a placard with a smiley face on it. He did this after 2 young climate activists were called in for police questioning after they were holding placards in public, standing against climate, calling for action against climate change. So even though Jolovan was alone, he still got arrested and charged for illegal assembly. Because of this, in my opinion, I think protesting in Singapore exists mostly online. And even then, just sort of posting about the government, tweeting about a racist or homophobic incident, about whether you support the opposition party, might be considered controversial protest. Even with posting online, one might unintentionally self-censor just because of how we've grown up in Singapore and how speaking freely is not entirely practiced in our community and country, and therefore it's sort of inevitable that you self-censor. I think a sizable amount of Singaporeans feel wary about how they talk and who they talk to, just because they feel like something they might say might be used against them in the future. Even in the arts, free speech is very controlled. In order to legally put up a performance, one must apply for a license from the government-run arts body, sending in your script and any sort of edit material or media. They'll then vet your work and decide if it's safe for public viewing. I work for Theatre Ekamatra, as I mentioned earlier, an ethnic minority company that does a lot of socio-political work. And we deal with a lot of sort of taboo and difficult topics. However, I think we take a very interesting way of dealing with censorship in that it's like a challenge to art making. And we try to be as creative as possible when presenting these sort of difficult issues within like a satirical context, which is very similar to what we did in Call to Action. So for me, the process of Call to Action has helped me realize and acknowledge what I subconsciously self-censor. And being around everyone in Edinburgh and with Clara and even my fellow Singaporeans has made me acutely aware of how much I censor, to the point where like I don't even know what I'm censoring. I think it's really important that as teaching artists, or any one of us here, that we provide like genuinely safe spaces to everyone to express themselves, and also most importantly, for people to feel free to ask questions and learn and understand from each other. And I think it's also really important for us to acknowledge like our personal biases and be empathetic to everyone's issues and scenarios. So yeah, that's what I have to say. And I'll pass it on to Remo and Eden.
Hi there. So as Dia said earlier, the sort of aim of this think tank is for teaching artists to be mentored and guided by young artists and create quiet protests through the medium of call to action. And when we were asked to do this, we wanted to sort of evaluate the idea of like sort of that traditional idea that everyone has of like what is a mentor, and we sort of realized like when you sort of initially think about it, there is that sort of hierarchy of like the mentor has that higher power, and we did not want it to feel that way. So for us, it was really important that there's no power dynamic there. We wanted everyone to feel like that we are working together as equals, and that sort of we're all just peers working together to create a bigger whole. And it was really, really important for us that we got that. It's really important that we create a safe space where everyone feels comfortable talking about what is important to them, because we know politics is such a sort of deeply personal thing, and to share, sometimes sharing what's important to you can be a really daunting thing to do. So for us, we wanted it to feel really, really like, we wanted everyone to feel comfortable sharing that with the group. We also want to foster a creative environment where everyone feels comfortable sort of expressing their political beliefs and everything in a really sort of creative way, and where they can think outside the box and feel comfortable to sort of experiment with those ideas, and sort of really create something special with this. And most importantly, we also want to like respond to the needs of our peers, because as much as we have thought about what we want to be as mentors, it's also really important that we sort of have those aspects that all of you want in a mentor, that all of you would want in a mentor. Because, you know, if, as I already said, like we want everyone to feel equal in this, it is really important that everyone has a say in how this goes. B, I can see you've got your hand off. Is that?
Yeah, but you can finish speaking. I just have like something I want to say about this, but you can.
Oh, that's okay. You can go ahead.
Sure. So just to quickly introduce myself, I'm Bia, and I live in Scotland, and I'm on the leaderboard for ITAC, and I also do work. I'm actually doing H&D in contemporary art at Edinburgh College. funnily enough. And I'd studied acting on that course as well. So everything you're saying I find very interesting. And I'm actually right now, because I also do work with the Fruit Market Gallery, which is a gallery in Edinburgh. So I work as a paid artist there, and I do various groups of young people, specifically with mental health. So there's a group I'm working on project right now, actually, which is around this, the idea of the young people working together, but there's not really a hierarchy to it. It's kind of everyone's having their own choices made, and it's very communal and collaborative. I just wanted to mention that because I think more stuff like that happening is so important to just build on. And the project as well is to do with, like, it can be to do with theatre, to do with visual art, music. So since I know a few of you are at Edinburgh College, if you want to get involved with that, just come up to the Contemporary Art Studio and we can talk about that. Just thought to mention in case you were interested.
That's perfect. Thank you for sharing that. That's really nice. I'd also like to pass it on to Aidan for the next section of the presentation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm really interested in some of the stuff we're talking about right now, because I think it's so important, especially as like a young artist, to have the ability to like express myself and like let my like mentors or like coaches or people who I look up to let me explore like my like individualism as a person, and especially like when we're working together or collaboration, to just let that be shown and not let any sort of not like censorship, but like just letting me be myself and explore my ideas, which I think that's really, really good. I think I've definitely been lucky in Edinburgh College to definitely get those opportunities. Thank you, Clara. And I just think it's so important as a creative, because, and as anyone, because you need to have people around you to boost you and for your success, to always have someone backing you. And I think that's so important, as like, especially in this like youth-led thing that we're doing, is to try and show you how we can work on everyone's strengths and like work together as a group to just boost everyone's like morality, which I think is really important. And I want to try something. So if everyone could close their eyes, and I want everyone to think of a great mentor in their life, or just someone who they look up to. And I want you to think about why. What attributes do they have in their life, for them as a person, that makes them so good? And so you can open your eyes, and you're welcome to share if you want of who. And the people that always come to my head are, you know, the famous ones like mums, dads, teachers, friends, even just everyone in this world who supports me and, you know, makes me who I am. And I think it's so important to break down why these people are so good, because this hierarchy system, I think, does get created sometimes in teaching. These could get worked on in a sense to, we must inform people that us as young people, we have such strong visions and strengths to be used. I think that's what we're going to be doing here. And I really hope that you're okay having us as your people, as teaching artistry. Okay, so I think I'm going to introduce Clara and Kai. Do you want to say a little thing? Or
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Clara. I am one of the co-founders of Call to Action alongside Kai. My pronouns are she, her. I have long red hair that sort of just past my collarbone. I'm wearing a denim shirt and I'm sitting in front of a window with a white background that's slightly faded. My whole process is surrounding amplifying the voices of young people with, for and by a creative process. Kai?
Hello, hi, my name is Kai and I'm from Singapore. I'm one of the co-creators of Call to Action alongside Clara. I'm from Theatre Ekamatra, a theatre company in Singapore, an ethnic minority theatre company in Singapore that presents and produces social political productions. I am wearing a white and yellow raglan tee. I have long hair just past my collarbone, and I'm sitting against a virtual background of the San Francisco Bridge. Yes. So I'm going to pass it back to Clara, who's going to introduce a bit more about the call to action process and framework and what that looked like. Because I know a lot of our young artists have thrown call to action project, and I'm sure you're wondering what this exciting project is about. So Clara's going to explain it all to us.
Thanks, Kai. So thanks for your patience, everybody. I'm aware that sort of as that word was getting thrown about, or that sentence, maybe it was a little unclear. Call to Action is a programme that was devised by Kai and I about 2 years ago, that was based on the notion of the living newspaper, which was established in Russia at the turn of the 18th century. And it was very much about using theatre as an act of protest, commenting on events of that time. Fast forward to the Prohibition in the 1920s, American theatre troupes used that as a way to sort of get out their message in terms of what was happening both in the news nationally, but also as an act of protest. And interestingly, at that point, it was the only way that actors were able to be paid. So Kai and I thought that was quite interesting from a political perspective, that during the height of COVID, we weren't able to make theatre, and we weren't able to sort of do things again politically because of our separation globally. So that had two main focuses. One, our partnership spans Singapore and Scotland, and as you've heard earlier from Anais, in Singapore, protest it isn't as available to our friends in that country as it is to Scotland. We have much more rights in terms of freedom to speech than our friends and colleagues do, and the only freedom that is easier to protest is online. So our whole platform became an online platform to have these discussions. What Call to Action is, or the living newspaper is, it's a set methodology whereby you create small vignettes of theatre that are maybe 2 or 3 minutes in length, that can use often satirical approaches, that is quite DIY in nature. So we sort of copied that aesthetic, and a lot of the stuff that we do is about using old cardboard, pens, very sort of DIY. And again, it ties in with our determination to reduce waste in terms of the materials that we're using. So what does this mean for these young people? Well, these young people came together for the first time together in Scotland to create pieces that were amplifying their voices connected to politics that are really relevant to them, but they filmed them in politically relevant places around Scotland. For example, there was a whole thing on a British game show that you could win your gas and electric money. So I don't know what it's like where you are, but certainly the price of oil and whatnot is rising globally. And on a game show in the UK, they said that you could win your money for that. And our young people were disgusted by that. So they created a whole game show that they were to take in front of our Scottish Parliament as an act of protest. The rise of gender-related violence is increasing globally. And they created a piece that was to be showcased outside of our high courts. But what does this mean for you? Why are we here for you? That's the interesting thing. So as we've already explained, Call to Action aims to create a global discourse relating to youth identity, and it disamples and disrupts the hegemonic narrative that surrounds youth identity. But how this is different is what we're interested in, is how do we disrupt that narrative whereby as teaching artists, you hold the space for other people. You're still the responsible adult in the room. How would it feel for you to be held emotionally, creatively by a group of young people, to be coached in this call to action process, when we can use this process to disrupt the narrative from a facilitative approach, but also in terms of amplifying your voices as teaching artists, to raise awareness, to be a teaching artist globally. What does that mean politically in the community, country that you're in, the society that you exist in, and then what does that mean for you? So working together, we have a very clear approach, and it's to learn, to listen, to collaborate, and to engage. And by all walks of life, the way that we collaborate with our young people, and hopefully with you, is to use this phrase: I learn from you, you learn from me, we learn from each other. And that goes back to what Remo and Aidan were articulating about trying to create a space of, or an equalising space, if you like, whereby young people are learning a coaching approach from us, from Kai and I, on a weekly basis. And then they work with you and they hold you in a space whereby they facilitate sessions that can look at your relationship with teaching artistry and to look at the global landscape of teaching artistry. We'll listen to one another. It's a space to discuss and explore what we do, but also to engage and collaborate to create an online piece of digital performance that we can then host as our 4th edition of Call to Action, that calls into question people's relationship with this as an art form, but also what does that mean for us? I can only give you a small example from what it means in Scotland. The Scottish Government are trying to slash our budgets for the arts in general, and a lot of people's livelihoods are at risk. And all of a sudden, they're thinking that the arts, community art certainly, can be the saviour for people's mental health, but without any funding, with reduced funding. So people that have never entered our arena before as teaching artists are using that as a platform to say that we can do that. We need to fund we need to plug our funding gap. We can do participatory projects without understanding how that works and what that means to hold the space for other people. So for us, certainly, our protest might be against these larger conglomerate companies that are trying to sort of use the funding to plug their gap. And it might be different for different people. It might be connected to what Lucia was saying about small acts of protest, about trying to look at what does it mean for you personally. I had the great pleasure of being at ITAC 4 in New York a couple of years ago, and Liz Learman gave this most incredible speech about trying to remove the hegemonic structures that exist within arts in terms of it not being high art at the top and participatory at the bottom, but how do we change the view of that? And certainly that's what our aim is within this project, is to work with you to amplify your voice about what this means, so you're not just talking within an echo chamber to other people within your field, but how can we turn that outwards? So we're talking to other people about our relationship with these things. And it's very much, for a change, placing you at the heart of that experience and not the communities that you exist in. It's about your personal agency as a teaching artist and your individual identity. And just like Dia and Star explored about what your identity means, is the whole picture of you within that frame. What spaces do you feel you can and can't take up as a teaching artist, as a neurodiverse person, as a cis person, as a man, as someone who is non-binary? And does that raise your visibility, or actually do some of these things make it harder for you to be seen within that landscape? So through this project, we will come together, and Kai will talk to you a little bit more about what that means. But the aim is that we are certainly coaching our young people to hold you in that space effectively. Kai and I will still be there, but it's not about our voices in that space. And then we'll end in creating a piece of online performance together and an accompanying resource that looks through the approach of training our young people to be coaches and the creative process that they've engaged you in that process. I'll hand you over to Kai, who'll tell you a little bit more about what that can look like in real time.
Thank you so much, Claire, for explaining to us what the call to action framework is and how our innovators could look like. So we're hoping to start our innovators project in March, and it will take place over a 6-week period from the 13th of March to the 24th of April. And we're only asking for one weekly session of 1 hour each with everyone. And what we'll do during the 6 weeks is 3 things. So number 1, we will share together the process of call to action with you so that you can use this process with your own groups in your teaching artistry in a range of contexts and settings to inspire further social action and change, like what we've done with our call to action editions with our youth from Singapore and Scotland. And together with our young mentors here today with us, we also want to create a digital resource pack to advocate for what the role of teaching artists do and what their role is in society in your respective contexts and settings in your chosen artistry form. And last but not least, of course, we also want to develop our young people here to act as the mentors and the one with more knowledge in this setting to share their experience and knowledge with you and how that might help you in your own teaching artistry. So if you're interested to be part of our Innovators project, Eric has very helpfully shared the link. So you can click on the link, sign up. And if you have any questions about the call to action framework or anything any of our young people have shared today or about the Innovators project itself, please feel free to ask us right now. We're opening the floor up to all of you to ask us any question you might have. It might not just be for me and Clara, might be for our young people as well. They're more than happy to answer your questions. Yes, Bia.
So I have a question about the weekly meetings. So is that a set date once a week, a set time, or does it change just because of work, studies, and everything? Just to know.
Thank you for your question. Yes, it's a set time. So the timing that we have decided on would be 7 p.m. SG time, and I believe that translates to 11 a.m. UK time. Correct me if I'm wrong. Till 12 or 12:30. So we'll book your time till 12:30 just in case we overrun, but we will try and keep it to 1 hour because I know we're all very busy people with other engagements. But yes, that's the time and day of the week that we've decided on.
What day did you say, sorry?
Monday.
Monday.
Yeah.
And do you have to prepare anything, or do you just turn up and then?
No, just turn up with your experience and your teaching artistry, and we'll take it from there. Yeah, you don't have to prepare anything. We'll do all the work within the sessions itself. There won't be any homework or work done outside of the sessions per se. If there is, we'll try to keep it as minimal as possible because we are mindful of the other engagements that we might have outside of this Innovators project. So we'll try to do it all within the sessions itself.
Okay.
I might just put down my contact information if you want to contact me or Clara directly if you have any other questions that might come up to you over the week and over the course of the week, if that's easier or more approachable for you to ask these questions. But if nobody else has any other questions, I'm just going to hand it over back to Eric to wrap us up. But thank you all so much for being such graceful and gracious participants of this think tank.
Thank you. I'm just writing a note in the chat box to say this beautiful sharing today. We will get the word out wider to our ITAC community to join this session. It's 6 o'clock. It started at 6 o'clock in the morning for me, but I am wide awake thanks to all of you. And am going to encourage my colleagues in the US to get up early to join this group because the quality of your commitment and your vision of possibility is exactly what moves this field forward and helps teaching artists make the difference in the world that they can. Again, thanks to all of you for putting together such a clear and compelling session for us. We will have a recording of this session for those who wish to review it. We'll have a link available and invite you. Remember that we have different kinds of think tanks every month. There's a list available on the ITAC website. And if ever you have questions, just drop us a note through the website. But I think the last message of today should be one final encouragement to join the beautiful work of this call to action, because it's a call to action that empowers a field of teaching artistry and shows what a difference we can make in the world.